Okay. Shalom, everyone, and welcome to the third and last, for now, tasting of the Technion webinar series, a series of 3 short webinars about food technology. Each webinar will be up to 30 minutes, including Q&A, in order to help you better digest the talk. My name is Yoash Dvir, and I'm the CEO of Technion Australia. By now, you should probably know who we are. Technion Australia is the local society of Technion Israel Institute of Technology, and we are here to fundraise and support the Technion activity and research. And we also run local programs like this webinar, meetup, school programs, and more. Tonight, our phenomenal speaker is Associate Professor Avi Shpigelman from the Faculty of Biotechnology and Food Engineering at the Technion. Avi Shpigelman heads the Laboratory of Novel Food and Bioprocessing. His lab integrates engineering, chemistry, biology, and microbiology to explore innovative food processing technologies and their effects on food ingredients and health. Professor Shpigelman's research focuses on the interplay between food processing, structure of food components, and their behavior during shelf life and at the end of their bioactivity in our body. Professor Shpigelman completed all his degrees at the Technion and conducted postdoctoral research at KU Leuven in Belgium, I hope I pronounced it right, before joining the Technion in 2014. He also served in the Israel Defense Force Navy Laboratory as deputy commander. Professor Shpigelman is a member at large of Non-Thermal Processing Division, NPD, of the Institute of Food Technologies and will chair the division next year. He was recognized as an outstanding volunteer of NPD in 2020. He also is the Vice Dean of Graduate Studies of the faculty and the Deputy Head of the new exciting Technion initiative of forming the Technion as a Sustainable Protein Research Center that we will mention later on. Avi, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Yoash. Now let's check that you see my presentation well and the correct display. Yoash, just nod if it's okay.
All good.
So thank you very much for joining and watching it later on. So today we are going to talk about food processing. Is it our friend or our foe? So let's just think about what is the utopian vision of our food consumption. Many people, if you ask them, how do you see a healthy food consumption, would have those pictures in mind. So you are eating something that is very close to the place where it was born, a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, and you are having it all with a family dinner at a constant time, and everyone is smiling and happy. Unfortunately, the reality of the modern area is not like that. First of all, we are living very far from the place where the food is grown. Second of all, we have a hectic lifestyle. We do not consume the food usually with our family, or at least not often. We have to do many things in between. And the truth of the matter is that most of our food is not grown by us. It is grown by someone else, in many cases, very, very far from the place we are living and consuming the product. And that means that if we want to live, we need to produce food in a mass scale, and we need to do it all the time for all the population. And very often, this comes into people's mind as a negative effect to the general statement that you are what you eat. That means that many people consider the fact that processed food, the food that is produced somewhere else, is not healthier for you and might not optimally be designed for your health. And this all comes in mind with another aspect, and it is what we consider as quality. And food quality is defined as a fact that a product meets our, as the consumer's, expectations. And I have to say that we are quite a spoiled consumer. We would like to eat a very fresh tomato or a very fresh banana that is grown near us, but we want to eat it all year round. But the fact of the matter, it is not growing all year round, and in many cases, is not growing near us. So our expectations are not easy to fill. Of course, the food must remain safe to consume, not to cause any food poisoning, which is also a challenge because of the growth of pathogenic bacteria. But we also want it not to change in any way during the shelf life. So it means that we want a food that is quite constant in terms of sensorial properties, for example, color, texture, and so on. And of course, we also want the product not to lose any significant content of the nutrients listed. So if we are talking about the history of food production and food processing, well, of course, it's not starting from right now. There is some debate on how long ago did we start to using fire, and the fire and heat is probably the most early method of food preservation, but we assume it happened about 2 million years ago, approximately, maybe 1 million, but it doesn't really matter. And at the same time, we already were using also drying. Our ancestors were using drying as a food preservation method. And of course, they started using fire, and fire, as I mentioned soon, was probably a very important factor in our development. Later on, and I mean much later on, probably about 15,000, maybe 10,000 years ago, we started using more preservation methods, such as fermentation. We understood that we observed that if we let some products ferment, we did not call it fermentation at that point of time, we can save them for longer. And that, for example, made cheese, alcohol, bread, and so on and so on. And about 200 years ago, maybe even a bit less, real food processing has begun together with the industrialization. And then we saw the development of canning as the first major step in food preservation technologies. And since then, of course, there were huge jumps in the development of preservation and processing methods to what we know today. In the early times, the most important reason to preserve food, the consumers, if we were not so picky, the most important factor was to prevent illness, so to kill foodborne pathogens. Now, it's quite different. We want the food, and as I will mention it soon, to have different effects, making it, again, much more complex. So, in recent years, the food processing has made huge leaps in the development of advanced and more sustainable food processing technologies, starting from this nice guy, Nicolas Appert, who developed retorting or canning, and to the way to now that we are talking about functional foods, and we are talking about foods that will not only provide the minimal nutrients, but also will make us happy, healthy, and with a better life quality. But at the same time, the questions rise. Is processed food good for us? And the most important step in the questioning of food was probably the NOVA classification. Many of you probably have already heard it. And they have defined the food, and the FAO also took this classification as an important classification to be used. Defined the food products to 4 groups: the unprocessed and minimally processed, the processed culinary ingredients like oils and butter and sugar, the processed foods like many of the products that are like baked breads, industrially made, and the last one, the ultra processed food, or UPF, which is actually defined as formulations of ingredients, mostly of exclusive industrial use, typically created by the series of industrial techniques and processing. And hence, it is called ultra processed. And very generally stating, it defined that ultra processed food are really bad for you. But later on, questions raised also about these types of classification, and with good reasons. Because if we are talking about such a classification, first of all, it significantly blames the processing on the negative aspects, while it's not necessarily the process is to blame for. It's very often the formulation. So if you eat a lot of sugar, a lot of simple carbohydrates, it's bad for you. And not necessarily because of the process, but simply because of the fact that to eat a lot of sugar is not good for you. And others have suggested different classification methods that are much more complex, with higher complexity in terms of considering formulation versus the process itself. And it's a huge debate now, what is good and what is bad, and is the processing is the one to blame, or the formulation, or the human itself and how it consumes the food. And when we are talking about, again, back to the consumer, of course, it is hard to fit all his expectations. We're talking about quality. So of course we need to keep the food product safe, but the consumer prefers a specific texture, it prefers a specific flavor, it expects a specific bioactivity of components, and we will talk about this a little bit later on today. It expects some color properties. That's actually a very interesting and hard thing to fulfill for the consumer, odor, and so on and so on. And we need to do it all, again, while minimizing any negative aspects. And we do it by a range of processing treatments, and some of them are based on heat, some of them are not based on heat, and we will mention this as well. Some of them based on the addition of different components, for example, salt or sugar, or by changing the pH, the acidity levels, or by adding preservatives, indeed. And we all do it not just to maintain the safety. That is, of course, takes for granted. But we also do it to fulfill the need of sensory aspects and to fulfill the need of comfort. I mentioned in the beginning, we live a hectic life. It's not easy for us to cook every day a new meal. And we also wanted to fill the need or the expectation of the consumer to have a diverse nutrition. And very often it is not easy when we're considering the seasonality of food production. So I will just give a small example on how and when processing can even be good. So we are talking about digestibility of polyphenolic compounds. And polyphenolic compounds is a very nice group of products, of components that are present in fruits and vegetables and practically in everything that is plant-made. And those components have a very complex structure, and this structure is responsible for the fact that those components can interact with a lot of other ingredients. And of course, those components are also responsible for many sensorial properties, taste, and also color. For example, the anthocyanins that are part of a group of anthocyanidins are responsible for the red color of berries, just for example. And the consumption of polyphenols in general is correlated by many studies with a reduced incidence of death, as you can see it here, for example. And in here you can see, for example, the reduced incidence of hospitalization due to heart issues. And it's getting even more interesting if we think about the impact it might have on different populations, for example, based on their smoking status and alcohol consumption, with a much larger positive impact in preserving the quality of life and preserving and lowering the chances of different diseases, for example, for smokers and for people that consume alcohol, or for people that are extremely overweight. But in many cases, for those groups of compounds, when those compounds were studied in simple model systems, like in cells or in small rodents, the beneficial effect was significantly higher than the extent of the effect observed in human population studies. And we still see a clear positive effect, but it's not as impressive as a more simplistic model studies. And it raised already 15 and 20 years ago a question: why? Why we are not seeing such an impressive effect? And it was partially explained by the fact that the absorption of those compounds is very low. And absorption of compounds, of small compounds, is very much affected by a parameter called the bioaccessibility. So how much the compound is accessible even for absorption. And for example, those molecules, the ones that are responsible for the red color, the anthocyanins, were actually absorbed as to be the least accessible by different studies. And part of the reason that it was suggested that those compounds are not very accessible is the fact that they tend to interact with practically everything. They have a complex structure that also have a hydrophobic fraction and hydrophilic fraction, and they can bind to metals, and they can bind to proteins, and they can bind to polysaccharides. And of course, in a complex food, they will see metals, and they will see proteins, and they will see polysaccharides. So their functionality in our body is suggested to be a very complex outcome of a combination of effects. Of course, the structure of the compound itself, and we have more than 10,000 different polyphenolic structures, and probably this is one of the cores of my research. And they have stability issues, so they are unstable, and they have processing issues, and they have the matrix-related interaction issues. And of course, there is also the method of consumption, the cultural preference. Do we eat it raw? Do we eat it cooked? Do we eat it after canning? Do we eat it in a juice? And it's all dependent on the culture and on the preference of the consumer. And to top it all, we also have the consumer-related factor. It can be genetic or non-genetic, like the microbiome of the gut. And we usually consume fruits and vegetables that are the sources of those polyphenols. Usually it is consumed actually after some types of processing that I will not go into specifically. It should be mentioned, and it is part of what I will talk about soon, in addition to the thermal processing that is used to kill microorganisms, recent years we saw a leap in the development of non-thermal technologies, like technologies based on high pressure. And the part of the reasoning of the suggestion of the development of those technologies was to find technologies that can, on the one hand, kill the microorganisms, but on the other, to preserve thermally liable compounds like the polyphenols. But when others looked at the bioaccessibility of complex foods having polyphenols inside, with milk or without milk, from different sources with different polyphenols, they observed a very complex outcome. First of all, the effect of processing, even if it was a thermal processing, was not necessarily negative. It was clear, on the other hand, that processing can affect interactions of the polyphenols with other food components, complexing the answer is processing bad for the quality of our product. And we saw it in different studies, and in many cases, we all even observed a clear increase in the bioaccessibility of phenolics in foods. For example, here in this case, those are orange juices or grape juices that were treated by heat for an intensive point of time. So in this case, the answer was complex even in those foods. So myself, I took it back. I decided, okay, food seems to be too complex. Let's go back to the most simplistic model systems. And here is our relation with Rosh Hashana. We used apples as a source of fiber, as a source of polysaccharides, and we used strawberries as a source of polyphenols, as a source of anthocyanins, and they were all extracted and purified to minimize any potential existing protein or any complexity that might arise from the original structure of both the polysaccharides and the polyphenols. We mixed them together, processed them, and then studied the bioaccessibility. And I will make the story very short. The truth of the matter, the impact of processing was present, and indeed, thermal treatments presented the lowest bioaccessibility in general, but it is a very complex outcome that contains also the potential interactions of the polyphenols with the polysaccharides that are intensified by thermal treatment. And you can see it here, for example, again for anthocyanins, that especially when the acidity was low, so a neutral system, the thermal treatment has had the most significant negative effect. On the other hand, advanced non-thermal technologies like high pressure processing presented the most close to natural impact. And we observed it, and it was statistically significant. And we did it also with kale and strawberries, and the conclusions were very similar already in the product level design. Just a few words about the Technion Sustainable Protein Research Center. We understand that we cannot continue with the consumption of the high amounts of plant-based proteins. That's why the Technion established the first world research center that focuses on the development of sustainable proteins, so not originating from animal sources. And I am proud to be the deputy of this center. And we are basing it on the fact that we already have a strong research activity in the field. We have cutting-edge infrastructure that we are now trying to improve even further, and the fact that we have a complex interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary collaboration within the Technion, focusing on this topic, which is probably the future of the development of food processing and food engineering. So some take-home messages before I finish. There is no modern life without food processing, and it's definitely not our enemy, it's our toolbox. If we use it smartly, it will be a benefit. If we use it stupidly, it will be our foe and can result in reduced health. Bioavailability and bioaccessibility are often suggested as the reason for the poorer than expected results in the utilization of the polyphenols, and their interaction with the metrics, they can affect the outcome on the bioaccessibility, but they are not the key player. So a more comprehensive understanding of how polyphenols can have a health promoting effect is needed to be able to engineer food products with maximal benefits. And I will end this with this picture, Shana Tova, to everyone. And I will question you. We saw now that we have a complex effect on the bioaccessibility of polyphenols. So does honey affect the health promoting properties of the polyphenols in apples? Nobody knows. Maybe someone, perhaps me, should study it. And you can also read about Manuka honey and its effect on cancer, also a very interesting topic. Thank you all.
Thank you very, very much, Avi. Just one question.
Yeah.
I think it was Oprah or Ellen DeGeneres that said that if a year 5 student can't read the ingredients, don't eat that food. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's an oversimplification of what is healthy food. In many cases, for example, many fibers, very complex names that the fifth grade kid will probably not understand. But the compounds that the modern and the Western diet lacks the most are fiber. So I would not go to such an oversimplification of the label of food ingredients. It is definitely important to educate about how to read labels and what does it mean, but still I would not go to such a very broad statement. Again, it must be noted, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm a food process engineer. So I have slightly a different view on the topic.
So my year 5 kid can stay home. I don't have to take her with me to the supermarket when I shop.
You can take, yes.
But I don't have to. She was my test lab so far. Any other questions?
Yes, I'd love to ask one question if there's time.
Go ahead.
So regarding the food processing qualification, not qualification, sorry. Regarding the processing classification, do you believe that it should be unanimous worldwide, considering agricultural differences, irrigation, etc.?
That's a good question. The thing that is not considered at all by any of the classifications is our differences in genetic profile. So we are very, very similar, but we have some differences. As long as in the current status, the classification is in any case very broad, I think it fits worldwide. If we will go in the future to more complex classification about health, then maybe we will also need to consider genetic profiles, which in many cases are a bit more complex. But we are not there. I don't see now the problem with the classification in terms of does it fit every place in the world the same. I see a problem with the fact that, first of all, we do not have enough information to make a perfect classification. And again, I think in many cases it oversimplifies a very complex topic. And this might mislead in some cases. Of course, you cannot base your diet on Nova foods as classified as ultra processed. But are all of them similarly negative? No. Is bread prepared at home definitely better than bread prepared industrially? I don't think so. So I'm not necessarily agreeing with the Nova classification. It should be taken for consideration, but again, some of the complexity is not considered by Nova or by other classifications as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, if there's no more questions, thank you, Avi, and everyone for participating today. If you have any other questions, please email me and let me know, and I will forward it to Avi. This concludes our testings of the Technion webinar series. Thank you all for participating. Please note that the recording of this webinar will be available from tomorrow on our YouTube channel, and we will have a link to it in our LinkedIn page as well. Last thing, all of the research and the labs that the Technion has would not be possible without your support. So I would like to thank you and encourage you to continue supporting us. We have a special fund that is dedicated to environmental research, and donations to that fund will go towards the sustainable protein center that is currently being built at the Technion. We will also have Professor Yoav Livning, who heads the center in October here in Australia, and he will give a few talks around in Melbourne and Sydney. Thank you all, and Shana Tova. Thank you, Avi.
Bye.